Greetings and welcome to another Time for Tea podcast with me, Andy Rayner, and today with my colleague Matthias. Greetings. And he's got a mug up, so as you know, I am very, very partial to tea. Matthias, what have you got in your mug? Is it tea or dare I say, is it coffee?
Today we're doing tea.
Okay. And is
Um,
that the normal?
it is. It would be a lie to say it's the normal, but I sometimes dabble in tea. Yes, it's
Okay. Okay. So I can't quite count you in my tea camp then.
not yet.
Okay.
No.
Not yet. Okay, I'll work on you. Very good. The other important question is your favorite flavor ice cream. I try and ask everyone what their favorite flavor is. So, are you able to make a decision on that?
Yes, that's an easy answer. At least from where the ice cream comes, because where I live in Hegdal, we have this perfect gelato place called Vitos, and they have the best ice cream you can imagine. In terms of flavor, it's very boring. It's chocolate.
Okay.
The plain chocolate they have is so good. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Okay, well, that's the important bits out of the way. The rest of this is just technology discussion. So, Matthias, for your background, people that haven't met him, is I will say conservatively quite a character. He actually won at our All Together Appear event we had a couple of months back, the Appearian of the Year. He's an immensely talented technologist. He sits in my CTO office team, but dabbles in doing all sorts of things, and is at the moment really focusing on helping some development strands get underway on some new development things. Matthias, tell us first of all, how long have you been with Appear, and what's kind of your potted 1 minute history of the kind of tech stuff that you've done?
1 minute. Oh dear. The first one is easy. It's about to be 13 years. I started just around IBC 13 years ago.
Okay.
As to what I do, or have dend is hard to answer. I started with UI and kind of on the XC platform, went up from there, or down into the back end stuff if you want to go into details. But yeah, and then it's sort of I got involved in the X platform in the early days and made some UI stuff there. And now I as you said, wander all over the place, just doing things and drink coffee. I think my official job description from Guide was go around, drink coffee, and talk to people.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, I think you do that very well. That's cool. It was also worth saying that you do a great job heading up some
Or
of our
tea.
summer students as well.
Yeah, that's just a fun side project during summer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the main meat of this conversation I wanted to have with you was the emergence of Rust as a programming language, and I know it's something that I think it will be an understatement to say that you've become quite passionate about. This guy makes YouTube videos about this all the time, which you can check out. But okay, so what I want to do is really a headline overview again, the 1 minute version, Matthias. What is Rust as a programming language, and how does it differentiate from C, C++, other programming languages that people would be more familiar with, or most people would be more familiar with?
Yeah. So Rust is a systems programming language, which means it would live in the same space as your C or C++ normally would. You can write operating systems or compilers or embedded drivers in it. That being said, it's useful in all of the stack. We use it in the front end as well as in the back end for the data processing. And it is, I would say, an evolved C++ in a way. It has memory safety guarantees that C and C++ doesn't have because it's just a modern language, and that's if you want to make a new systems language, you have to have it memory safe these days. And yeah, it's just a elegant language that you can use pretty much for anything you want.
Okay, and how did you come across it then? What was your introduction to Rust in the first place?
Yeah, so I started dabbling around 2019, which was just when the async await syntax was stabilized and merged, which was actually end of August in 2019. I think it was mostly fueled by a rage towards JavaScript and JavaScript backends in general. I did not like that, but I did like the async await syntax. So I started looking and said, oh, this Rust language seems to have a good story in async await. And then it kind of just stuck. they contact you at a certain point and you have to sign the contract in blood that you will promote it in every chance you have, and these kind of things. The whole cult kicks in. But before that, it was very appealing. Yeah.
Cool. And for someone that is an experienced C++ developer, for instance, how steep is the learning curve to get into using Rust, would you say?
It really depends. It's an individual thing. It certainly it almost feels easier to start as a new developer to a certain extent. The students coming in have it in school, and they are brought up on Rust in some of them, or they're not used to the way of working in C++, and that's something to really unlearn in many cases. And some people do not like it at all. Like it's an acquired taste, definitely, for if you're used to the flow in C++. That being said, a lot of the concepts are the same, or at least you should think about them in C++, memory safety and lifetimes and who owns which data at which point. It's just not explicit there as it is in Rust in terms of, it's a compiler if you do it wrong in Rust.
Yeah, yeah. So diving into kind of the applications as we're using Rust. So give us an overview of kind of where we're using Rust within a peer dev at the moment.
Yep. So we have two greenfield new software projects that both are running on the Rust stack, which is the VX software solution and the estate manager that we're making for monitoring our hardware devices. Both of those are full stack Rust. And in addition, we started, as always, it's the story with Rust. We started with internal tooling, development tooling, some production tooling, quite a few years ago, actually. But it's only the last, is it 2 years, 1.5 year, that we really embraced it for bigger software projects.
Okay. And what would you say is the rationale for the decision behind going this way?
It's mixed. Most of it for VX is boiling down to we need performance that you would get from a systems language because we're doing actually video, frame by frame processing and moving lots of data. And then there's it's actually the async story again. That the async story in Rust is much stronger than it is in C++, at least ecosystem wise. I know C++ has like coroutines and callbacks and async await now, but it's quite far behind as far as I understand in terms of support in the ecosystem packages and these kind of things.
Yeah.
But there's also just a general, it's a modern ecosystem with modern syntax, and you have a package manager and a build system, which if you get into C++ territory, these are non-existent as a standard. I know there are solutions that you can pick from, but they're not standardized, and it's a harder story to manage.
Yeah. So in the move to Rust, in what we've done internally, was there any code reuse we could do, or is it kind of throw everything away and start again? How does that work for us?
We have a success story there, which was for our SRT solution. We have this on the X, which is accelerated by the FPGA, and we obviously cannot port the FPGA to general compute. But the control layer there was already quite modular and disconnected from the X platform as a software project, which meant what we essentially did was Sindre with some guidance just wrote a CXX wrapper, which is a Rust C++ interface library, to Rust, and then we just directly linked in the SRT software layer, which does all the control flow and logic of the SRT. And then we just delegated what the FPGA is doing on the X to the Rust software implementation on the VX, and that just almost seamlessly fit in. Of course, obviously there were some knobs to tune and some hurdles along the road, but for the most case, it was plug and play, reusable C++ code from Rust.
Okay.
And we know the opposite is also true. We just didn't have a use case, but you can also quite easily take a Rust library and link into your C++ code.
Yeah.
And use it from there.
That's cool. So, how unique are we in terms of the kind of the media industry software construct? So, are we the only people doing? Are many other people adopting Rust? Do you have a view of what the bigger landscape is?
Yeah, to some extent, you know this better than me, but we know for a fact there is some interest, at least from MXL, for instance, to adopt the Rust layer on top of the MXL solution. And also GStreamer, for instance, has been pushing heavily on Rust for a couple of years already. So
Okay.
there's definitely all over the industry, not just the video, by the way, but also, all kinds of core services are moving to Rust. Payment services are moving to Rust because of the memory safety guarantees and these kind of things.
Yeah.
Uh,
So in the Rust world that you've been living in, where you've been doing, as I say, your own YouTube videos and stuff on it, the interaction you have with other people, other people that are adopting this, do they come from like many industries generally? I mean, what's the destination of the other people using this?
yeah, so it's all over, but from the more important the software you're making is in terms of how many people die if it fails, for instance, the more likely they are to consider moving to Rust. That, like, military cars, Volvo has started adopting it, for instance. It's certified for automotive use with oh dear, the compiler. Never mind. You can use it in cars, basically.
Okay. Oh, that's cool. Now, we talked a bit about the learning curve earlier, and you're saying, it depends where you come from. I guess a good example of that is your anecdotal experience with our students. Do you want to talk about our summer vacation students? By that I mean, do you want to talk about how easily they've been able to jump into Rust?
Yeah. So I don't want to speak on their behalf in terms of easily, but they have a limited time frame. It's 2 months. That is it. And in that time frame, they go through the Rust course that we hold. That's a 2-week course. It's a Google Comprehensive Rust that is open source. You can find it on the internet if you want to run it yourself. And after that, they pretty much jump in and start writing code in existing projects or in greenfield projects. We have had 2 of those, both greenfield and jump into an existing project this year. And in both cases, that has gone quite well. Like, obviously, they get sometimes stuck and need help on, syntax or some concepts. Like, lifetimes will always get you in the beginning, but they're always able to cope and produce something within those 2 months as a team. And that's I'm uh, I'm not sure they would be much slower if they got tossed into an existing C++ code base, and that's starting basically from scratch in Rust. That being said, now it is starting to seep into academia and master's degrees, so some of them had some exposure from the get go.
Yeah.
But principally speaking, they started from relatively scratch in Rust and got productive within a couple of weeks. But there are definitely variations there. For some people it takes longer. Some are uh, faster in adopting the mindset.
Yeah.
And also,
Cool.
just again, getting them to sign the contract is hard. So they cannot be allowed to write Rust until they have formally, signed in blood.
Very good. So I've alluded to your kind of dabbling, not just dabbling, in full immersion in Rust outside of your day job. Give us a little bit of an overview. You can even give your own YouTube channel a plug if you like, of what what you've been doing, because I think you've also spoken at a conference about Rust and stuff. So give us an overview of what your outside of work Rust engagement's been.
Yeah. So I first of all, I made a YouTube channel this year just to talk about some really esoteric deep dives into crazy memory related stuff. So if you're interested in that, it's a Mathias Codes on YouTube. Um, I also held a 10-year anniversary meetup celebration here at our offices in Oslo on the 15th of May. That was the 10-year anniversary of Rust 1.0 being released. That was, we had a good, I think it was like 30, 40 people who showed up from the Oslo community. And then I'm doing a talk on NDC Tech Town this year in Kongsberg on the 25th of September on Rust usage.
Wow.
So that's pretty much my official involvement. I make some, crappy open source stuff on GitHub, but it's of varying usability.
Very good, everyone. So check out the YouTube channel. You can go down a real rabbit hole there with all of the details. So the other buzzword in programming in general that's been flying around in the way we're working in Appear this year has specifically been AI and
Yep.
AI tools. And I guess the question is Rust useful in an AI driven world as we use more and more AI to help us build and test code?
Oh, definitely. I would say it's not even useful. It's almost irresponsible not to use it to a certain extent. At least if you're doing systems level stuff
Yeah.
with AI, because you could argue you shouldn't use AI for that yet, but if you are, you should use Rust. Uh, because it's just the strictness helps both in terms of security, that there are certain categories of issues that the AI could not have inserted into your code. In terms
Yeah.
of memory safety reasons, basically, this is a good thing to have a very static check on your code. But also just in terms of efficiency of the AI, it's since the language is very explicit, there's a lot of information encoded in the text, in the tokens that represent your source code. The AI kind of sees the concepts more clearly in terms of what's being owned, what's being referenced where. So there's just more information available in the context for reasoning about the code, and that combined with the compiler output being very useful for humans. This means the AI has a pretty good time of making Rust code, because it gets rapid feedback and it sees this is the meaning of this code by just looking at the text of the code. So there are fewer invariants encoded in the head of the programmer and more invariants encoded in the text of the program, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, this is one of the places where Guide and me actually agree, which should worry everybody. That he doesn't necessarily, he didn't sign the papers for the cult, but he uses Rust as the AI target because he realized that this is, is one of the sane ways to use AI.
Yep, very good. For those listening that don't know Guy, he is another member of our CTO office team that's been spearheading some of the AI work that we've been doing. Cool. Well, that's exciting. So this all sounds almost utopian and unbelievably perfect. So I'm sure there must be some danger signs, some pitfalls. What's the downside, or is there indeed not one?
Well, it is still true, even with AI assistance, that it takes probably a bit longer to write a certain functionality in Rust. Like, you need to iterate a bit more and think a bit more upfront. It's still, I don't think we have good numbers on this, but I still have the gut feeling that overall, if you consider time to fix and correct mistakes and look for mistakes in things like memory or correctness of the program, it still evens out. But there's certainly an upfront cost that is more visible to the actual day-by-day writing. And you need to think more about what you're writing to make it compile, essentially. And I mean, hiring is still non-trivial, I would say, at least for senior developers, because there just aren't that many available. On the flip side, we know the students really liked it, and we have good feedback that most of them want to come back and work with Rust. And also this year, we had actually 5 Rust developer students from last year come back and join us. For 5 actually, yeah, which is that's a pretty good recruitment pathway. But for recruiting seniors, it's a bit, they're not that readily available in Rust yet, because they don't exist.
Yeah. Okay.
But we have also good, you can always retrain a C++ developer to write Rust mostly. It's more or less the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, well, thank you for joining me for this little tech deep dive on Rust. It's been good to learn a little bit about your passion and how we're using that to our advantage in deving within a peer. That's really cool. So I think I can firmly conclude that you're definitely a believer here, and we'll continue to be socializing and articulating the benefits to the
Yeah,
peer development collective. That's very cool.
yeah.
Excellent.
Usually hard to make me shut up about Rust. So I think that will
Yes.
continue.
So containing you to 20 minutes on this podcast has been quite miraculous. Anyway, thank you for joining us. I'll let you go and get another cup of tea, or maybe you're going to go to the other side and get coffee now.
I think I'll
And
splurge on a coffee. Yeah.
thanks for joining us. And we must have another chat at some point when we can explore another technology area. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us, Mathias. And thank you, everyone, for joining in for this latest Time for Tea podcast. Have a great day wherever you are. Cheers.
Yeah. Yeah.